This is Love Never Fails with your host, Marilyn Redmond. Marilyn shares her experience, strength, and hope, and includes tools to help you find your inner strength for health, healing, and empowerment. So now, please welcome the host of Love Never Fails, Marilyn Redmond.
I am Marilyn Redmond, your host. You are listening to Love Never Fails. We are coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And I'm so glad you're back joining us today, and I hope you're telling your friends and neighbors that we're here every Tuesday afternoon, 6 o'clock Eastern Time, with a live call-in talk radio show so they can call in with their questions, and I'll give you the number right off so you can be ready to call in, 866-451-1451. And we're talking today about a spiritual view of guilt, shame, prayer, and meditation and how it affects your life. So if you have any questions about that, or if you have other questions, because I have been answering questions now for over 25 years, and actually closer to 30 some, and if I've also been on the internet answering over 200,000 questions over the last couple months, and so I do have answers if you want to call in. So glad to have you with us today on Love Never Fails. And we're going to talk about opening that Pandora's box today about feelings people don't usually talk about. It's not the typical discussion in a little jovial group, and unless people go to counseling, they sometimes don't even identify their guilt and their shame. But I've discovered how important they truly are. They motivate and run our lives when we don't recognize what's going on. We're like an iceberg out on the water, and what you don't see about the iceberg is bigger than the part you do see. What you don't know about yourself is what's running your life. So we want to take a look at what you probably haven't looked at before. And it's just an emotion. It's just a feeling. It's an energy. It's not who you are. So we don't want anyone scaring and turning off because in feelings, sometimes people get scared with their feelings, but it's just an energy. And we talk about it. It can flow out, and you don't have to have that feeling anymore. Emotions are energy in motion. Energy in motion is an emotion. And so when you know what it's about, actually it goes away. Isn't that a wonderful experience to say, I don't have to keep that feeling anymore. I can talk about it and let it leave. I can see a counselor if I have embarrassment about it and do it in the privacy of a small area where someone's talented to help me with that, to let that energy leave so I don't have to be motivated from it, from like the dark running my life. Something I don't even know that's there is causing my difficulty, and I can finally expose it to the light of day. Most people that are talking about this kind of change in our lives usually leave out one important factor. There were several years ago was a really popular DVD called The Secret, and they were talking about it, the law of attraction. Now, the law of attraction works very, very well, people. That's what life's all about. You want to attract what you are inside. That's why you want to release your guilt and shame. Because if you're attracting that, it's time for it to go and flow out of your system. But if you don't let it leave, you're going to attract more guilt or more shame or more. And we talked earlier a couple weeks ago about fear. If you don't let go of your anger, you attract more anger. So we're learning how to let those old energies leave and flow out so they're no longer coming back to us. What goes around comes around. And so you don't even know you're sending it out. That's what's coming back. And of course, it upsets us because we want to do something about it and we don't always know what to do. So I want you to know that where you are in your consciousness is really what's under the iceberg. And that's what you're attracting. That's what I had to find out because of my domestic violent marriage. I attracted an angry husband who was raised in an angry family. I was an angry person, just as abused as he was, raised in an angry family. Like attracts like. I attracted it to me. The lessons I have learned from this have expanded and actually brought me into freedom from the ego, freedom from the fear, the anger, and the guilt and the shame. Just recently, I've gotten in touch with that again. It seems to leave in levels of awareness. It's like digging down into the dirt and you find another level, and you dig a little further and there's another level, and you're just still peeling the onion, some people call it. And when I discovered that the fear and the anger covered up the guilt and the shame, as the more I looked into what was going on with me, I had to do something about those too. I didn't even know really what guilt was about several years back, and I've had to learn that it was my behavior. If I wasn't perfect, if it wasn't proper according to my parents or my church or the school or whatever, then I was supposed to be feeling guilty because I didn't live up to their demands, their expectations, and so they made me feel that I wasn't a very good person, and so I had to learn that guilt was linked to the perspective of the viewer. And sometimes people put their guilt onto me, which is usually the case. My mother guilted me very well. If I was trying to do something for myself and she needed some kind of help in whatever it was, one day I said something, well, I was going to go do such and such. And she says, well, that's selfish. You should be here taking care of me. And so guilt was laid on me very deeply through many parts of my life. So I found that guilt was a very motivating part of my life. As I was leaving treatment for codependency, they called me into the office and said, you have a real guilt problem. Well, people, it's taken me 32 years to actually understand guilt and shame, and guilt actually covered up the shame in my life, which also came up very much like Mount Vesuvius this last week. So we want to uncover these and handle them in a way that will get us out of that motivation into being the loving person we truly are. So down deep inside of us are these feelings. We've stuffed them. And there's many ways to stuff your feelings, and that's called addiction. I was told as I was leaving that day from this counseling session that guilt is a useless emotion. And I had really not a big idea of what he was talking about, but in talking with him, I felt my shoulders kind of relieved of some of the guilt that I'd been carrying. The burdens of my family seemed to get dropped on my shoulders. So I went home that night feeling much lighter. My shoulders didn't feel so heavy, and that felt much better. So I liked that feeling. And I found out as time progressed that my church guilted me for something that happened before I was even born. That society guilted me. I didn't have a fancy enough career that paid impressively compared to some other people. Teaching was not what you call a well-paid profession. In fact, I had as much college education as my dentist. He was making 3 times what I was. A friend was an engineer. He was making twice what I was. So society makes us want to look better, have better behavior in the eyes of those around us. So then we're made to feel guilty if we don't rise up to that. And schools do their job too. If you don't pass a test, or if you are not successful in school various ways, then they make you feel guilty. So there's a lot of ways for people to put guilt on us, and we're going to tell you more about how you can change that in your life. Stay tuned for the answers. I'm your host, Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails. We are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I'm Marilyn, your host at Love Never Fails, and we are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Welcome back as we're talking about guilt and shame today and answers in prayer and solution through meditation. And if you're identifying your guilt, writing it down, itemizing them, the universe likes you to be specific. So as you itemize your guilt or your shame, make 2 different lists. We're going to talk about guilt in a little bit, shame in a little bit here. But on your list, take each one in your prayers and meditation, because we'll talk about that too in a minute. It raises you into a higher consciousness. But you put it up into the present, into where you're not in the past anymore or the future. You're living right now is where things change. and you ask to have it humbly removed and replace it with love and grace. So each time you replace your guilt with love and grace, guess what? It's going to grow. What you focus on grows. And all of a sudden, my life went into grace. Gradually, it started getting better. And I was meditating at the Death Valley and one day inside the tent. It was a hot day, and I'd gone out of the sun and thought, oh, I'll lay down for a minute and meditate. And all of a sudden, I felt grace from head to toe for the first time in my life. I was no longer completely guilt-ridden, and I have learned to do the same thing with shame. We can ask each one to be humbly removed, and then we ask to have it replaced, because if you don't replace it immediately, something else can pop into your consciousness, and then you got to replace it too. You might as well go straight to what you want and ask to have the love and grace replace the shame in your life and move into that grace of God, that love of the universe, that neutral feeling where you just feel good. It is a good day. Call into your questions, 866-451-1451, and we'll be glad to answer them about this or any other question you have with your relationship, sickness, or whatever. We talked earlier in these programs about illness and sickness and relationships. So we have a wide range of things that we can discuss and answer if you have a question. One day I was working on trying to work my guilt out of my system and be a better person, and I really didn't know how to do it. So in my meditation, I looked up at the wall, and I had a cross up there, just a simple one, and it started to talk to me. The voice inside said, I am the King of Kings, and you're my child, and I want you to start treating yourself like a princess. Now, nobody had ever given me permission to do such a thing. I was not treated like a princess. In fact, my stepdad's mantra was, we don't spoil Marilyn. So to have something good happen to my life was all amazing to me, that somebody would give me permission to be nice to myself. Wow. So I started to do nice little things. Buy something at the store or have something special for dinner that I really liked, or do little things that I wouldn't have done in the past because I was more focused on other things. And I started to feel more comfortable inside, happier with myself, and I didn't feel so guilty, like I was being neglected or unrecognized. You're not a worthy person anymore. So I started to treat myself like I wanted my parents to treat me. Wow, did I start feeling better after that? And I started to move out of that guilt. And I just was really happy that I had paid attention in meditation, which we're going to pick up in a little bit. So if you're working on guilt, it's a useless emotion. It's a low, dark energy. You can just ask it to leave. Ask and you shall receive. Ask it to leave and replace it with love and grace, and your life will change. I discovered the guilt covered up my shame. That's a deeper hole of the hole we've been digging, and I don't have to dig it any deeper. Thank you. Shame means I'm sorry, I am a mistake. And it's personally linked to your integrity or your essence inside. One day when I was meditating, God said in his silent voice, you must think you're not a good person because you try so hard to be good. I was trying to be Miss Perfect, trying to be good so everybody'd like me. And so therefore I did think I wasn't a good person. How do you handle becoming a good person? Well, all the abuse I'd gone through, I felt like used merchandise, and I didn't feel good. I didn't feel like I was a worthy person or acceptable. And what I know today is I read several books by John Bradshaw. I am a big admirer. I first saw him in Seattle 33 years ago, and he came with his first book, The Family, when he describes these dysfunctional parts of our family actions. And he says that shame is highly, highly correlated with addiction, depression, violence, aggression, bullying, suicide, and eating disorders. I could relate. I have tried. I'm not a kind of person to bully anyone. That's never really been my nature. But the rest of them, my aggression was very stuffed. I was involved with violence. Of course, addiction played a big part of my life. I was addicted to other people, primarily, besides alcohol and prescriptions. And I did try suicide. I've never had an eating disorder, thank you. But I definitely understand if you don't feel worthy, if you don't feel that you have value, you're going to compensate. And ways you compensate is through addiction, depression, in this case, suicide, which I tried several times. So you see, there's ways of compensating, but they're dysfunctional and they're going to make the problem worse. So I found out my inner child, there's a little part of me that was terribly wounded, and my soul had splintered off from all the abuse. And we have to bring that inner child back together. We have to mend our souls. And the Bible would be purifying your soul. You take that woundedness and we heal it. That's what I do as a therapist. And as a past life therapist, we do it with karma. So you see that those splintered off parts are hurting. And we will do anything to try to feel better. And it's not always productive what we do. We don't always have the right answers of how to heal that. So we've attracted these situations into our life because like attracts like, and we're under the iceberg. The things we don't see is what we need to look at. What you don't know runs your life. So when you talk to that little damaged child inside and you bring him back to knowing he's been loved, he always was loved, and bring back by healing all the splintered off pieces and wounded pieces of their soul, and you glue it back together with love. And so we're healing our souls, and it's very important. I had a client last night. We worked on doing this very thing. He, in regression, identified the woundedness. We've been working on this for some time, however. He came back to return. And so when we were through, it was his healed child was happy and came out free and wanted to have a wonderful life. So come back and find out more about how this resolution can happen with you too. I am Marilyn Redmond. We are at Love Never Fails, and we are coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am Marilyn Redmond. This is Love Never Fails. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And we're so glad that you're paying attention today and listening and staying tuned, because this is valuable information. We don't need to walk around feeling guilty. It means somebody's telling us we've done something wrong. Do you want to know the truth? The truth is you've never done anything wrong. It was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Those are the things that were supposed to happen so you could learn from them and get your answers from. We learn from our mistakes. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, Edison, who invented the electric light bulb, when someone asked him, well, do you feel like a failure? It took you 1,000 times to get it, you know. And his comment was, well, now I know 999 times that don't work. So we can thank Edison for helping us to realize that we're just going to try again, and we're going to find the answers. It's not a big deal. Doesn't make us a bad person because we made a mistake. In fact, Ron Howard, the Happy Days fellow, is now producing movies. And when he received his Oscar, somebody asked him about his victories and wins. And he says, his comment was, I learned the most from my mistakes. So people, you don't carry guilt. It's a useless emotion. And also when you are feeling shame, somebody's trying to convince you there's something wrong with you. Well, I was laying in meditation one day, and the voice from that same cross came across to me and said, Marilyn, there's nothing wrong with you, and there never has been. We come into this planet, into this life, to learn lessons of how to release these lower negative energies that are perpetuating our unhappiness, our misery, our despair. We've come to change it, and now's the time and opportunity to do that. When I was told there was nothing wrong with me, and there never was, it freed me. I was given validation. I didn't make any mistakes. I'm not a bad person. All these things were necessary for me to grow beyond them. I actually picked the family, and you did too, that you were born into. They had the right energies. You had to move beyond. They couldn't do it. Guess what? It's your job. Take responsibility. Humbly get out of the old places and into where you really truly are yourself. There's nothing wrong with you, and there never has been. And when you start doing esteemable little behaviors, you're going to get some self-esteem. Try doing something for somebody else and seeing if you can be helpful to those around you. Maybe there's a neighbor lady who is a widow and needs groceries, and she can't, her car's broke down or something, and she needs a ride to the grocery store. Maybe there's somebody in a nursing home you know that would love to have some company, and the family never shows up. I had that situation. I drove over an hour and a half to go see a fellow I knew in a nursing home, and nobody would come see him, but I went up there as often as I could and let him know that he was not alone. People did care about him. And when you do these things, go to do some volunteer work. When you do these things, you start feeling good about yourself. So you get out of that old feeling. The energy moves out. Emotions are energy in motion, and you are responsible for your feelings. So some of the things I found out is that when it comes from the heart, that's when it really counts. Don't just jump in there because I'm supposed to do it. But I made little plaques for people, counted cross stitch, and I handed those out. And they were made, I made them, I was proud of them, I shared them with my friends and gave them out, and it was a really great way for me to start gaining some self-esteem. And Bradshaw in his book says it's essential to tell the truth at all times. This will reduce life's pain. Lying distorts reality. All forms of distorted thinking must be corrected. And what I found out, we'll have some programs on mental illness and mental health coming down the pike. And what I found out is that I had to be as honest as I possibly could be with myself, or I would be as mentally ill as my mother, and she was paranoid schizophrenia, and I've been declared sane. So be honest with yourself. You're going to be genuine. Come from your heart. What you give around to others is going to come back. Bradshaw says, we understand that by giving, we receive. We grasp that by lighting others' candles, we do not lose our own light. The more candles one lights, the more enlightened the world becomes. So go light people's candles today, tomorrow, and in your future. And as you're healing that wounded little child inside, do this. If you don't keep a journal, try this out. Write with your dominant hand a message to your inner child. And then when the message is written out, change the pencil or pen into your non-dominant hand and write out the response. And your little inner child will give you a message. And periodically I do this just to kind of check in and see how the healing's coming and if I'm feeling better inside. And what we want to do is move into prayer. And I didn't have a clue about real prayer. I was raised in a church where you read your prayers out of a book. So I always read them out of the hymnal. And of course, my prayers that's the only ones I knew until spontaneously I had to pray for God to help me. I really didn't want to die the night I knew my husband was going to end up making sure I didn't go home that night. So I found out you've got to plug into God. It's called making a conscious contact. It's like plugging in your electric toaster to the electrical outlet. And when you plug in, you raise your consciousness into that higher consciousness that is the presence of God without the ego interfering with the negative messages. So when you do that, then you've tuned in and you're connected, and that prayer is really raising your energy up into that space, that higher energy. There's a real popular prayer that you can find on the internet called The Difference, about a lady who got up one morning, rushed off to do all the things she had to do, and then her day went downhill, 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 and the next morning she got up and said, I have to take time to pray because my day was so bad yesterday. If I don't take time to pray, it's going to be another bad day. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously, her poem. It's a much nicer poem than what I just paraphrased. But you get the idea that that's what starts my day to day. Before my feet hit the ground, I ask God to guide my thoughts, words, and actions and help me because there isn't anything He and I together can't do today. And I ask the Holy Spirit to be in charge of my life for the rest of the day for the next 24 hours, because if I'm a whole spirit, I'm acting mature. I'm acting rational, and my day will go much better. So prayer is really another way of saying intention. My intention the other day was to get quite a few things taken care of before I had to go out the door to a meeting. Wasn't sure I could get everything done, but as I walked out the door that morning, I felt really good about myself because it all fell together. Stay tuned for some more helpful information for prayer and meditation. I am Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails. We are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am your host, Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails. We are coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and we're having a lively discussion about something not normally discussed. This isn't the typical topic of the day, and a lot of people are not feeling comfortable sometimes with this topic. I hope that's not a concern because nobody else is around. You're just plain having a good time listening and hearing maybe some things that are helpful. That's my intention. So the intention is really powerful. I prayed one night before going to a play in Seattle. My boyfriend hates to drive in Seattle, but they have really wonderful plays, and we go up there often, but the traffic can be atrocious. And one particular day I prayed that the traffic would be not so bad, that we'd have a safe trip up to Seattle and back, and we'd be taken care of, and things would go very smoothly and well, because he gets very frustrated easily in traffic. So here we come out of the play, happened to be Anne Frank's diary, and went into the parking garage, and there's a flat tire. Now, I prayed for everything to go smoothly, right? And so he's on his hands and knees changing the tire in this garage that we were parked in. And I prayed to my angels, and I said, what's going on? Things were supposed to go smoothly for this trip into Seattle. And the response was, well, Marilyn, it is a very rainy night. The wind is blowing sharply, very strongly. It's very black out there because of the weather so blustery. And you would have been next to the road changing the tire with the whizzing cars going by. You are in a garage with a roof over you, so you're dry. The light isn't very strong in here, but it's enough so you can see what you're doing. And I had a little flashlight I could shine on him too, so he had some direct light on him to help. And it says you're not getting wet, it's not blowing on you and getting you cold. You're not getting the traffic whizzing by. You're here in an empty garage taking care of it in a nice, quiet, dry place. And so I told my boyfriend what the answer was, and he says, I got the same answer too. What I found out was you're going to have experiences. You can't pray them away, but they don't have to be the worst depth of despair as you go through them. You're going to have the experience, but it wasn't out in the cold, windy, wet weather by all the traffic and in the darkest of nights. So we had the flat tire, but it was a better circumstances to take care of it. So when you pray, you're still going to have problems come up. They just don't have to be the worst way to handle it. So know that your intentions, your prayers are answered. They are heard. They help you out the best they can. One of the prayers that's very common for people is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Well, this prayer has been real meaningful to me. I've learned I have to change me. See, accept what I cannot change is other people, places, and things. So if I can't change others, the only thing left is me to change. And when I change and say, thy will be done, that means I'm sending love to the situation. If I'm coming from what I want, it's probably a selfish answer, a selfish situation that benefits me, maybe at the expense of others. I don't try to do that on purpose, but if I'm looking at it from a selfish point of view, it's not helpful to the situation. So I need to change me into a loving person, and that's what we're talking about, is how can I project love out to myself and others so that comes back instead of the painful misery that does come back prior in my older part of my life. And so I've learned to change my fear, as we talked about earlier in a program, my resentments. Today we're talking about changing guilt and shame. So we don't have to be that person anymore. We can be a channel of love to others. That's why we're here. And the best way to accomplish that is through meditation. And in meditation, you bypass the ego to find the true inner consciousness of yourself. Ask the silent voice, be still and know that I am God. Or you might think of it as a knowing, or sometimes God works through people to help you. In fact, that's going on in my life right now. I have some people who said, oh, I'll come and help you with your garden. And they're out there working right now. So plays sometimes give me messages of what I need to hear and how to handle my life too. The moral of the story of the play comes through and say, oh, I know why I came to see this play. I had to understand this message. So there's different ways to receive those positive messages that can guide and direct us into a better life. It's like going into a silence and tuning the radio dial to the right frequency. When you're in meditation, you're in a higher consciousness. Prayer puts you up there, and if you're tuned into that higher consciousness, it will talk back to you. So prayer is tuning in, and meditation is listening. And at first, it didn't come right away, but over gradual time, I did find the voices were telling me, and I was starting to just know things I didn't know before. I tried to read a book once about meditation, didn't make sense to me, so I didn't even worry about it. But when I got into a state of exhaustion, my psychiatrist said, you're going to have to take some time off from work. Turned out to be 2 years. I was in such exhaustion from being a people pleaser, doormat, overachiever, workaholic, all the things that I did wrong. I really just laid in bed and could hardly breathe. I was so tired. I couldn't even watch television. And so I laid there breathing and saying, what should I be doing, God? What should I be doing? I was such a doer. I didn't know how to be myself. And the voice came back and said, now that I have you flat on your back, you're going to learn to meditate. And I just said, well, I don't know how to do that. I'll just open up myself completely to you, and whatever you bring, I know it's from you, and I'll pay attention. And I think that's the trick. So many people have problems with meditating, but they don't completely open up to receiving what is coming or pay attention to it when it does. And the first year I meditated, I started getting answers to how to heal my mother's and myself relationship, which was not a very good relationship. It's hard to have a relationship with a mentally ill mother. So I want to tell you how this meditation came about and how it ended, which is surprisingly well. Stay tuned for the rest of the story. I'm Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and this is Love Never Fails. I am Marilyn Redmond, your host, and this is Love Never Fails, and we're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And I was talking about meditation, and I was learning from listening to the voice inside and starting to heal my relationship with my mother. When about a year later, I was abandoned on the Oregon coast by my husband at a program we were attending, and he got angry and irate and drove off without me and left me with a person who he'd given money to take me to the airport so I could fly home. And there I was stranded out of town. He took off with the luggage at the end of the trip, so the clothes were all dirty anyway. So what was I going to do to get home? And we were on the Oregon coast, so I decided I would go to the beach and meditate and get some answers because I was starting to get pretty good at listening. And so I was a little scared about this whole thing, actually. And so I went and sat on some driftwood, and the water was coming in. It was very pleasant. And I said, okay, God, I want the message to come in a big neon letters, in a big sign like Times Square. I'd been to Times Square, so I knew how big that billboard was. And so I'll know it's from you. I wanted to make sure I got real good information, of course. And I'm sitting on the driftwood, and nothing happens. And nothing happens. So I decide, well, I'll get up and leave. Nothing's going to work out. As I was getting up to leave the beach, guess what? In my imagination came this billboard with neon letters going across it in big letters. And it's not what I like to hear. I sat back down on the driftwood and said, God, you don't understand. I can't do that. Let's erase that and try again. So the billboard showed up again with the same message in neon lights. I says, God, you don't understand. That's not going to work for me. Let's try it again. Well, the third time the same message appeared. And I finally had to accept that I was going to have to ask for a temporary separation in my marriage. Now, it was a really tough thing for me to do because in those days I was emotionally still 3 years old. And I was stranded there basically without any money, just a credit card. And how was I going to work all this together and to actually speak up and say that to him? I knew that was going to be really tough because I've never lived on my own because I was so young. Even with a teaching job, I couldn't leave because I didn't have any living skills. How was I going to leave that marriage? So during the course of time, I found a battered women's shelter. And of course, we mentioned that book on the first show, Getting Free, and read that book. And I met a lady who was in a similar situation, and she'd made it out of her divorce into living on her own. And she didn't have as much money as I had coming in. And I thought, if she can do it, I can do it. So I flew back home, prayed like a Dutch uncle because I know when you send out love, you're going to get love back. So I told him in that spell, you might say, he was very glad to see me return. What I needed to have a temporary separation. Well, it wasn't until the next day he realized what I'd said, and then that's another story. But if I hadn't have followed directions of that meditation, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair today telling you how I overcame all my problems. I had to apply what I was being directed and guided through and put it into action. They say faith without works is dead. And I had to apply the meditational information into my life. And it's not been an easy thing to do. So when you meditate, you're going to get information and you have to act on it. And it saved my life in this case. So I know that it's important to do that. If you don't apply it, then you will quit getting answers. And I don't want to quit getting those answers because they're sure better than what I had before. What I know today is when I first started meditating, I was connecting with what you call third and fourth dimensional energy. That's like the people passed over usually are in third or fourth dimensional energy, and those people are called a psychic. And the more I meditated, the higher up my radio tuned to a higher frequency. And I started meditating and getting into higher frequencies of archangels, Jesus, Mother Mary, Saint Germain. Actually, I'm going to channel Saint Germain tonight on Ashtar on the road. And so I started getting connected into the higher consciousness of fifth dimension and higher, and that's called Christ consciousness, unconditional love, which is Christ consciousness. So my tuning in to the other side has gone up and up, and so now I'm called a medium. Those things happen when you meditate. You get the gifts of the Spirit. One way to achieve and help in getting this place that I'm talking about is when you're hypnotized, they put you into that place in a guided meditation, they call it. I call it therapeutic hypnotism because the therapy, the love that comes through in hypnotism when you're going for healing, like the kind of healing I do when people come to see me or on the phone or on Skype, we do ways of helping people get into that higher consciousness to get that direction that's going to, in my case, was life-saving. So it's important to know that there are ways that we can achieve better answers than what we've gotten. In fact, there's nothing outside of yourself can save you or give you peace. And so I was always listening to the medical profession. I was listening to the churches, the schools, whatever. And they weren't giving me the answers that were keeping me alive. I, at the time, was dying, and my body said so. When I turned to the answers within, Today, I have a wonderful life, a beautiful life, going quite well. Not that it's perfect, because today my computer crashed. So there's, the road isn't all roses, but it's so much better because I have a peace of mind inside that it's going to work out. There are solutions. I can take care of it. I can stay rational and calm through it. Whatever the disturbance is, I don't have to be manic and chaotic or irrational, do something that's going to actually make things worse. I can handle it in a way that is actually productive and more mature. So prayer and meditation has helped me to grow past the old reactions that kept me in the guilt and the shame and move forward into being more productive and prosperous, leading me down a path where I know that the universe protects me in all things and takes care of me in all things. And I could tell you lots of stories about that. So it's a matter of, are you paying attention to what's inside, that voice inside? We've not really had much training to do that, and my church taught against it, actually. So it was difficult for me to make that adjustment. With all the television blaring at us nowadays, most people look outside for all their news and information, but I'm here to say, look inside, it works. I'm Marilyn Redmond. I am coming to you from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and the show is Love Never Fails. I am Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails. We are coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And we've been talking about guilt and shame and resolving it with prayer and meditation. And it's very important to understand most of the time we are living in the past. Whatever happened before, we just keep recreating it like it's a wheel, like the hamster wheel going around and around. Where do you get off and where do you change and move into a new place? Well, that's what we've been talking about today. When you itemize your guilt and your shame, and ask to have it removed and replaced with love and grace, you're getting off the hamster wheel and you're moving out of being a victim. You have been victimized by your own mind. It's between your ears. So we're going to move out of our heads, out of our ego, which is called edging God out. And we're going to move into our heart, which is merging God in. Now, you can call God any label you choose: higher power, spirit of love. Different churches and cultures have different names from their different languages that they call God. It's an energy. It's not a person. It's an energy that we can manipulate and move into our best interests. Tesla says life is all about energy, vibration, and frequency. And that's really what we're talking about. It's not the people that have harmed us. It's not situations. It's this energy needs to be moved out so we can have a higher loving energy. So it's about changing and being responsible for ourselves. We can change our feelings. So with self-examination, prayer, and meditation, you can move into a better life. And we don't have to stay recreating the past. We don't have to worry about the future. What we do today will create a better future. Every time you improve today, tomorrow will be better. Now is the time to do it. So when you move into the now, the presence, the moment, right now is reality. The past is history. It can't be repeated. The future isn't even here. So instead of having one foot in the past and one foot in the future, put both your feet right down underneath you and have a really good day today, and that'll create a better day tomorrow, knowing there's nothing wrong with you and there never has been. Treat yourself like you're the prince or princess of the King of Kings. It's the energy that loves us all, the creator that created us. And you can practice that on a daily, continuing basis, and every day can get better as you move forward off the wheel. And we can heal that karma by love. Love heals everything. So we want to know that you're in the presence of love, beyond the past, not in the future, so you feel good and all is well. Right now, you are safe, worthy, and everything has happened the way it was supposed to. So you can grow from that experience and share your wisdom. Remember to check out my website at angelicasgifts.com, my books at amazon.com, my blog, marilynredmondbooks.blogspot.com, and YouTube. I have lots of YouTubes. So as you're remembering each day to be in joy, gratitude, and the presence of feeling good, then you're in reality. If you don't feel good, there's something from the past and it's not real. So you can release it and bring it into reality, knowing that everything good is reality, everything positive is reality, and the past was not necessary that you have to hang on to it anymore. It's not real. It's like an illusion, and you can leave that behind. It may take courage, so you can say, God, I need more help for this one. Here we go again, and that's what I've had to do, is ask for more help each time I move forward. It's usually a challenge into something better than what I had in the past, and to move forward means that I'm growing, and we're all growing. So just know that this is the path you're on, and we want you to be sure and tune in next week because we'll be talking about angels. I've had many, many, many angel experiences, almost died 12 times. So bring your questions next week with you, and we'll talk about angels. See you then. I am Marilyn Redmond. You're coming from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio to hear Love Never Fails next Tuesday. See you then. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Love Never Fails with your host, Marilyn Redmond. Go beyond old ideas and understandings and hear Marilyn's solutions to healing and a higher consciousness. Each week, here on Marilyn Redmond's Love Never Fails.